Finally tonight, a story that was both an opportunity and a challenge. I mean, what do you ask the man who helped Paul Newman mix up his first batch of salad dressing, who was a classmate of Tennessee Williams, a friend of Ernest Hemingway, a guy who knew Marlene Dietrich, Dorothy Parker, J.D. Salinger, Sophia Loren? Well, when A.E. Hotchner comes home to St. Louis, you do want to ask him about A.E. Hotchner and how the heck he got to where he is, considering where he started.
I love reading my own stuff.
He has been a writer since World War II, books, plays, articles, scripts, and his memoirs, King of the Hill, which was made into a movie in 1982.
So, the little bow-hunk sniping butts again.
A lot of it was shot in St. Louis. This is a stretch of olive just west of Taylor. It's a true story about a poor but bright boy named Aaron living with his family in a cheap hotel at Kings Highway in Delmar, which has since been torn down. Always behind in the rent and just an eviction notice away from being homeless.
Hey, walk me over to
and
the
if you lived, as we did, in one room in a squalor hotel.
The boy is now a man well into his 80s, and this past fall A.E. Hotchner came home to St. Louis to read from King of the Hill and its sequel Looking for Miracles, which had just been reissued in a single volume by the Missouri Historical Society. He hasn't been poor in a long time. He first made a name for himself with a biography of his good friend, Ernest Hemingway. He also wrote biographies about Sophia Loren and Doris Day. He's known so many other famous people in his life, he wrote another book just about them. And one day, in the 1970s, Hotchner decided it was time to write a book about himself, about his childhood growing up in St. Louis. He had just moved to Paris in an apartment right off the Champs-Élysées. It was about as far as you could get in so many ways from the old neighborhood here around Kings Highway in Delmar.
And I began to ruminate. I thought, you know, this is some far cry from the Westgate Hotel. And I had never really related my life then to how it had once been and how far it had gone. And the more I thought about the life I had way back then during the Depression, and the more I thought about where I was now, eating good French restaurants and living this other life, I began to experience again the things that were happening way back there. And I think the fact that I was that far away, an ocean away, under a different environment, somehow triggered my thoughts about my own early beginnings. I first began the book, the first 100 pages, from an adult looking back on his boyhood. And after 100 pages, as I usually do, I sat down and reread it. And I said, you know, this is a grown-up looking back, but this is not the emotion of a boy of 12 years of age, living through those years. So I threw away the 100 pages and I started again. And I found that I could capture the voice, my voice, when I was 12 years old. And that just happened for no reason that I can explain, except that that moment of luxury on the Avenue Victor Hugo in Paris triggered that memory of the boy that was in the Westgate Hotel in St. Louis.
Read King of the Hill, and Mark Twain may well come to mind. Hotchner's Aaron may remind you of a Depression-era Tom Sawyer or Huck Finn.
Well, that's a great compliment. Sawyer and Huck are the best of the Twain books, and they're autobiographical. And it shows you again the stuff, not that Connecticut and King Arthur's Court and all that isn't an entertainment, but there's something that is deeper and more moving about those two books, and I think that's because that's what he really knew about. And I got a glass of cold water.
Writing what you know is a lesson Hotchner began to learn when he was at Washington University, with a little help from another student in his playwriting class named Tom, later Tennessee Williams. Williams angrily left WashU when his student play was not chosen to be staged. Hotchner's was. They'd all assumed Williams would turn in the best play because he'd been writing these great scenes based on his own family, early versions of the Glass Menagerie.
But when the time came, Tom wrote a play called Me Vasha, about a munitions king of the world who had a map in the back of his desk, and he decided, well, I could use a war there, and he'd point and then there'd be a war. It was simply awful. I learned something from that. And believe me, I have never tried to write anything bombastic or to sound like Eugene O'Neill or whoever you're not. Eugene O'Neill was writing his own stuff from out of his heart and his guts. And I think imitation is fatal.
What, are you gonna push the car?
In the movie, in the book, and in real life, young Aaron was helped by his tough, street-smart friend Lester in moving Aaron's father's car so it wouldn't be repossessed. The car had no gas. Lester pushed, Aaron steered, but couldn't reach the pedals.
Anyway, I might as well get up on my knees so I could really see. That was much better. I could steer now and see everything.
Keep going! Don't stop! Keep going!
During Hotchner's visit to St. Louis, a group of teenagers from the Historical Society's theater group performed for the author their play based on his book. And afterwards, they wanted to know what happened to the characters they played.
She's 88, and she has 3 kids. And Lester, I tried desperately. I never heard of him, saw him again. I don't know what happened to Lester.
Let's go.
After he got arrested and the cops took him off. Those were bad times. The cops then were absolutely without any restraint. So, maybe Lester went that way.
In one of the most memorable scenes in the book and the film, Aaron is alone. His mother's in the hospital, his father's on the road, and he's so hungry. He cuts out pictures of food from magazine ads and eats the paper. But Hotchner says his story is just not about a poor city kid. It's about a kid left to fend for himself. A teacher once sent him essays about the book from her students in a wealthy San Francisco suburb.
And these are kids who say, now, we've never had a moment's hunger or anything, but we can experience having to survive. Our father is away on board meetings, and our mother's busy, and we're home alone, and we have thoughts of being alone, and we have thoughts of neglect. And they singled out in this boy of a time long before they were born, in an economy that they couldn't possibly have experienced, and yet they were experiencing something emotionally. And you can't imagine the depth of their feelings about the book. So it isn't just kids from bad neighborhoods who identify with being hungry and broke and all that. These kids found emotionally a lot in there that they related to.
Yeah, just survival on a different level.
Survival on a different level.
A.E. Hotchner is still writing. He and Paul Newman still have the food line and are raising money for charities, including their free camps for kids with serious illnesses. Hotchner's life has been an amazing journey, but even as he nears 90 years old, he's too busy to think about all that came before, and he's not thinking of retiring.
I guess if I ever did, I might begin to sort of sum up, but it always seems to me I'm always so involved now with the camps or with the book that I'm about to write, which will come out next year, and the things I'm doing, that I really don't have time for appraisal. And not that I take them for granted. I think they've all been wonderful nourishment for whoever I am today. And as long as I still enjoy myself, then that's okay. Any other questions?